to innovation and business savvy, and I'll tell you why. We need, right now, transit is a critical tool, but it's just under fire on every front. And we need somebody who is an innovator who can figure out how can we effectively mesh with Uber and fix the first and last mile issue, deal with the housing crisis that our bus drivers have to contend with. How can we do all of that? And I think the only way you're gonna really have a leader who can effectively address that is somebody who really knows how to think outside the box and is creative. And then kind of adjunct to that, and part of it is somebody who is business savvy, somebody who understands how can we create, our funding is the biggest problem, right? There's just no money. What are some new avenues of funding that we can get? Some new P3s that we can get, I mean, just any kind of an effective person who has a good track record of showing how they have been innovative when it comes to cash flow, because that's a problem that I don't foresee going away. And we really need someone who has some new ideas in terms of handling it. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of the things I've heard from various stakeholders is, you know, the dynamic playing around COVID is not going to make things any better. Obviously, sales tax and revenues and things like that are going to be lower over this period of time, and we're going to be facing shortfalls. I mean, we've seen the revenue projections, and while there was a restatement of them and it looks more positive, there still is a gap. There still is a funding gap and shortfalls, and related to fast tracks as well. So I can appreciate that.
I guess I'll jump in with some comments, if that's okay. Next.
I'll offer a comment.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, so those comments are right on, but a couple of caveats. I mean, I think, as always, we're looking for a person who probably can't really exist. So we have to decide what the priorities are. You know, to be a little more boring, if that's the right word, in the short term, we really need somebody who can, you know, hold the place together in some really difficult times. And I think there's going to be difficult times for some years to come, with trying to figure out how to fund things, dealing with the politics of the situation. There are going to be cuts, dealing with the workforce. I mean, unless some miracle happens awfully soon, it's going to be a really tough job for a while. And that kind of suggests you need somebody who comes in with enough experience and knowledge and savvy and so on. But, and this is a big but, because I really agree that in the somewhat longer term, what you really need is somebody who can indeed reimagine RTD. Because I think RTD needs to be totally reimagined, just like transit agencies everywhere. And not just a little reimagine, not just a let's tweak a route or find a way to raise another 2% revenues, or I don't know, you know, some small things. I think it's going to have to be some pretty large changes in terms of how the agency really provides the service that it does, how it integrates with all the new forms of transportation that are out there and manages them, how it coordinates with all the local governments. And boy, in RTD's area, that's a lot of local governments, all of whom are pulling and tugging in different directions. And, you know, that to me kind of speaks to a somewhat different set of skills, unfortunately. And I'm not sure how you meld all of those together in one human being, and on top of that, have some business savvy and an ability to run a large organization. Although some of that could be offloaded. The person at the top doesn't absolutely have to have all the business savvy or even all the ability to run a large organization, but the person does, I think, have to have the ability to hold it all together. And that's tricky. And I think the really critical thing is somebody who'll have credibility. And that, how the heck do you know that when you hire somebody isn't easy, although I suppose you can see what they've done in their current and past jobs and lives. And it's credibility with the riders, it's credibility with the many different interest groups that we have, it's credibility big time with all the local politicians and regional and state level politicians. And by credibility, and to me this is really important, that does not mean saying yes to everybody and telling them what they want. Obviously, it means telling them the truth and being seen as somebody who's going to tell it to you straight, even though you might not always like the answers. Now, of course, you know, who's ever in charge isn't really making all the policy calls. There's an RTD board that does that. And that's the way it should be. Nonetheless, staff has a huge role to play in helping shape those policy decisions by providing the information. And if they're seen as providing honest, accurate information, that goes a long way. If they're seen as pushing things in one direction or another, yeah, that's a problem. This is a big lift. You know, I wish I could make it simpler and there was some nice little soundbite of, hey, this is the type of person we're looking for, but this is going to be a tough job. And I guess I'm assuming that you're kind of looking in multiple directions at once, in the sense of people who have a track record of running large agencies like this, but also hopefully some people who have a track record of being innovators, even if they maybe haven't run large agencies like this, but are somehow, at least you believe, capable of doing so. And those are kind of different, maybe different folks.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Who else?
Thank you.
This is Joanna. I've got a few comments. I tend to agree with much of what Matt said. And actually, the first word I had on my list was we needed somebody who is good with innovation. We need people with experience that isn't just forever transit. I love that people have transit and transportation backgrounds, but maybe in today's world, we need to expand a bit and reach outside of that box and have somebody who has a very good background in being collaborative with all the different players that we might have to work with. And that's, like Matt said, we've got local governments. We have a ton of transportation agencies in the metro area. We have our advisory committee represents a really strong body of folks who look at who are the underserved people and the ones who need the transit the most right now. So we've got to have somebody who's willing to get outside that box and look at some creative solutions. They have to have some financial background and understand how all that works. They need to be creative. They need to be able to work with FTA, with federal agencies, with folks in Washington, the political side of things, all the way down to the small transportation agencies we have in the community and the housing agencies and the folks that have to get people on buses and trains. So there's quite a cross section. Now, truthfully, the leader doesn't have to do all of that, but then he or she needs to be able to pick up a support team within RTD, bring new people if we need to. I hate to say that. There's a lot of folks that do great work at RTD, but if a new person comes in, maybe a couple of new folks under them will be helpful, which is their call, but they have to be willing to do that. I suppose, like Matt, I could talk too much about it, but really wanting somebody who will get outside the box a bit and be willing to coordinate. The financial situation is really tough all across the country. It's not just RTD. The COVID situation's made it hard. On the other hand, what's the opportunity? Can we look in a positive direction? Find somebody who is willing to take this opportunity and grow RTD into something that looks different. That it's not to say we don't want trains and buses, but how do we coordinate with the Ubers and the first and last mile services, the local communities, and other kinds of transportation that can interface with us. And somebody has to be open to that. Anyway, I've said a lot. Let's give somebody else a chance.
Hi guys, this is Elizabeth. I think, coming from the southern suburbs, it's really important for the next CEO to really understand how dynamic our ridership is and what the needs are for not just the those within the central hub, but also those how RTD impacts those external to that hub, and interfacing with them and listening to them and what what we're looking for, and bringing some stability and reliability to the agency, not just as far as routes go and times and that kind of thing go, but also like Matt said, the credibility of that leadership, and someone also who has the strength to deal with this. It's a hard job. You get beat up a lot, and they have to be willing to do the work and have the strength of leadership to be able to be the face of RTD going forward.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Nancy, haven't heard from you.
Yeah, hey, Roger, this is Ben. And,
Ed, go ahead, yep.
My perspective is that the RTD is probably the most politically oriented transit agency in the country. You got an elected board, for one thing. It's a creature of the state legislature, and the state legislature is involved and meddling in RTD affairs all the time. And I think RTD is getting battered by the media right now. They're getting battered by the legislature. They're getting battered by a lot of local government officials because certain rail lines aren't open on time. I think you need a real politician in this job. And I think someone who's really outward facing and has PR skills, marketing skills, political skills. I don't think we're going to get to a place where we can innovate unless in the short term we've got somebody who can really set an agenda that's outward facing for this organization. And I think that's, there's a certain level of competence you got to have, experience you got to have in the industry. You got to know the finances and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, if you don't have somebody that's really politically savvy, I think the agency is going to get eaten alive in the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
This is Joanna again. I guess I would jump in on what Ben had said and add that because our public and our social community lately is very much at adversity between the political parties in this country, we really need somebody who's gonna, and this is my personal belief, stay in the middle, not go off one end or the other, because that will fail us. We have to have somebody who will negotiate both parties, be nonpartisan. And that's hard to do in today's world, especially because of everything else that's going on. But I think that's kind of building off of something Ben mentioned.
Thank you.
This is Nancy.
Go ahead.
I'm on 2 Zooms at the same time, so sorry. I agree with a lot that's been said, but my top things are, we have to know who our customer is. You aren't going to be everything to everybody, or we just fail. Know who your customer is. The person needs business experience, looks at things differently. The innovation, when I think of Reimagine, it's like having a pile of Legos built into something, but taking all of those and putting them back to nothing and figuring out how that structure needs to be rebuilt to serve the customers that we need to serve. not in a metro region this size, not everybody is ever going to be on transit. They just aren't. We've got households where one person's going from the north to the south, and because we don't all have the same kind of possibilities in what we can connect with, it's just not real. They're going to get in their car and go. And then there's some that can get on one form of transit or not. So the biggest piece is partnerships. The ego has to be set aside. The partnerships have to look real at RTD can't do everything. They shouldn't be doing everything. And having those partnerships for the gaps that are not our customers, that somebody else can serve better. We have to be willing to let go and do that. That's the reason I think a good business person knows that bottom line and can do that. And I have a pug that is crying for some attention here, so I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Ryan, I think we haven't heard from you. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Staying on mute, so maybe that's a no. All right, Greg, go ahead. What else?
Does anybody have any perspective? You know, one of the things that you've touched on is funding. And again, I've heard from a number of communities, a number of stakeholders, the size of RTD and the challenges with that. I'm aware that fast tracks and the fact that it's not completed, or there are different portions of it that have not been yet completed, and feelings from those various communities about how the CEO's leadership and RTD's leadership in trying to mend some of those and build some buy-in from those communities and going forward, as obviously with COVID and with reduced revenues and reduced ridership and things like that, that's going to continue to be a challenge that RTD faces. And, in your interest in seeing that as one of the priorities someone addresses as they go forward, or do you see this as more of RTD's future really needs to be centered around continuing to provide great service for what the services they have, and the maintenance that's going to be needed on the rail side, on the bus side, those sorts of things? Any perspective on that?
Well, I'll jump in. I mean, I'd like to agree with Nancy actually about the partnerships, because I think that is a piece of how the financing is going to get resolved. That may be a little too strong a word, frankly. There's no magic here. I mean, RTD is, I think, actually a somewhat unusual agency in that they get kind of no money from the state of Colorado. They have a regional sales tax, and that's what funds them. I know there are some other agencies that have regional funding too, of course, but an awful lot of agencies get a certain amount of funding from the state because they're seen as doing, providing fundamental services to the citizens. The way it was set up here is the state contributes kind of nothing, even though, as somebody mentioned, the state legislature is more than happy to jump in and push and pull and tug in all sorts of directions while providing no money, which is a nice deal if you can get it. So I think it is going to just be, it's already critical, but it's going to become even more critical that RTD really figures out a way to partner with all of its communities. And that's hard because some of them feel they haven't gotten a fair shake. And, whether they have or haven't, well, it kind of depends on how you look at it. But nonetheless, if that's how they feel, it's hard to deal with them. But, as Nancy said, RTD can't provide everything to everybody. It's a huge district, way too big, frankly. It's one of the problems. And you know, are the communities going to say, hey, we already contribute this huge amount of sales tax. Okay, now we're going to contribute even more and provide the local transit that you need. I don't know, but I don't see any other way to get this done, frankly. So I think you need somebody who understands that and maybe has seen how you get from here to there and really does have those political skills to make that happen. That again is not so easy, but the right person, I think, could manage to pull it off by explaining how it really is going to work better for everybody. So yeah, that's the financing, and I think the other piece of financing is, you know, the inherent trade-offs of doing what seems like the right thing to do. Let's provide service to the transit dependent and the people who really need transit, the lower income people and so on, which we certainly want to do and to some extent need to do. But that often is at odds, just logistically at odds, with providing service on routes that serve a heck of a lot more people and raise a lot more revenue for RTD, fare box revenue for RTD. It's just how it is. It's how the metro area is laid out. It's how most metro areas are laid out, probably, because of the way we do housing in metro areas. And somebody has to be able to deal with that too. I hope whoever, you know, you're talking to and whoever the board talks to asks some of these questions and sees what type of answers you get back. And hopefully they're not just the usual, you know, frankly, the type of answer I could give. I would like somebody to give an answer that's a lot smarter than what I could give. You know, the hemming and hawing, and oh yes, this is hard and we have to talk to everybody and we have to balance it all out and make everybody happy. No, that's not the right answer.
This is Joanna. I'd like to add something before I forget, because you made some good points, Matt. And one of them here is that a really important piece of this is the ability for RTD to coordinate and collaborate with our local services. Maybe RTD shouldn't be providing bus service to everybody, or the paratransit services, all these extra services. I know FTA requires that RTD does some of these things. But maybe what RTD needs to do is more teamwork with our local folks to make sure our underserved communities do get what they need, but not think RTD has to provide it all. So this is back to the old thing about innovation and creativity. How do we work with everybody all around the periphery of RTD? How do we work with the communities like Lakewood and what their services could be? How do we encourage each other and work together? This isn't how transit used to be. It's a new place for transit, and the money's not going to be there. I totally agree. It's just sort of not nice that the state doesn't provide RTD money. The states slash their budget terribly because they don't have any money either right now because of COVID. So we can blame them all we want, but if there's no dollars in the bank to share, that's not going to work. So this is a time to be innovative with this and reach out to our local governments and find out how RTD can provide core services, really working to hone in on what everybody really needs, to get back and forth to employment centers and maybe getting the shorter trips to doctor's appointments and some of these other things. Maybe there needs to be some coordination with some other people who actually can provide services for less money even. But it's a big set of things to do. It's not simple. The challenge is how to innovate and encourage other folks to play with RTD and work with RTD.
I would just echo that as well, in that when it comes to people and the promises that RTD has made, people aren't forgetting what they were promised and what hasn't been delivered yet, and they're not going to. But given all of the heavy financial constraints, the political situation, the lack of funding, the changing face of transportation in America. The
Mhm.
solution to me that I see is innovation, really. You need to have somebody who is a diplomat who can innovate, maybe rejigger some of these different agreements or understandings with different communities. Just, you have to find new solutions. And I feel like transit is one of those, it's, you know, you need somebody who above all is a public servant and will figure out, how can I make this work to the maximum benefit of the people, the community that I serve, which is a very big community and a very diverse group of people. And I feel like if you had somebody who had their heart in the right place and they had a history of being innovative when it comes to working with different people and also creatively finding financial solutions, that to me is like about as sweet of a match as we could get.
I want to add something before we go too much further. To this is important for our group. We want a new manager, CEO, who will value the Citizen Advisory Committee. We have an amazing set of people here, and you're not seeing all of us at all, but we have a set of folks with some wonderful background and experience and a great set of ideas. And this new person has at their fingertips a group that's ready to really provide some support. And that's, I really want to put a plug in for our own people. And we volunteer our time on this. We're here to help the best we can. And it doesn't mean we just do the yes man thing to RTD. We think you're great. Well, we value transit, but our group will tell this guy or lady or whoever comes in, we'll tell that person what we think and whether we think it's good or not. And I think that's really important.
And I've got one other comment, and that is kind of, I'll put it under the heading of transparency. I do like RTD, but honestly, getting information out of them is almost impossible at times. And this was true when I was mayor of Boulder and at other times. They don't do a good job of collecting information. They are massively behind the times in terms of technology. And I mean, just, I don't get it. You know, it's still like 1990 in RTD land, as I am not so fond of saying. And, you know, if they really are going to partner and they're really going to go out there and do things so many of the people have just spoken about in the last 30 minutes, they're going to need to be a lot more transparent. Yes, promises were made 20 years ago, and the world is very different. Not just because of COVID, but because transportation has changed and is going to change even more dramatically in the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. And the metro area has changed in ways that maybe weren't quite predicted. So it really is important to understand what works and what doesn't work and what's cost effective and what isn't, and what moves people and what doesn't, irrespective of some of the promises that were made. And that's really hard because people get annoyed, but you can't ignore reality. And so I think somebody has to be able and willing to do that, but also open up the information so everybody feels as if they are seeing accurate information and they're just being told by RTD, here's the way it is. That really gets people's backs up. And I think that's what's happened over the years to some extent. Unfortunately, I'm not really blaming anybody, just kind of an accumulation of what's happened.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other input they want to share? And you know, one thing I've been thinking about as you've shared your comments is this has been really helpful for me to hear this feedback and additional input. And I think it is important for me to have the opportunity to talk to you, because as I talk to candidates and share what I'm hearing from different stakeholders, you know, having your input as well is really valuable as we go through this, and especially as it comes to whoever's ultimately selected and their ability to work with you and understand where you're coming from as a collective body and as a stakeholder group for RTD. as you were talking, I was thinking about, in my mind, the types of candidates. And I think that I'm pretty excited to sit down with the board or the search committee to go through candidates' resumes and backgrounds and experiences, because I think we have a pretty diverse slate of candidates. And I mean that in all of its facets. I mean that from race and gender and ethnicity and all of those components. And I really do believe there is a very diverse group of candidates. And transit, as some of you probably know, it sounds like some of you are pretty well versed in transit at a national level, even an international level, has not been the most successful and done the best job at promoting diversity within organizations at the senior level. And so vast majority happen to be white men that run transit organizations around the country. We've gotten better, but it's not as good as it can be. And so, but I think we've got a really good representation of different backgrounds and experiences, and again, races and gender and ethnicity. And part of that also is because I think we've got a group of candidates that are come from different backgrounds and diverse backgrounds. There are some candidates that are steeped in transit, and then there are candidates that come from other industries as well. I've got some candidates that come from utilities. I've got candidates that have worked at various state levels or municipal levels, or at various, whether it's local or national. We've got candidates in the private sector who have worked for Fortune 500 organizations. And so I think there really is an ability to think outside the box. And in whatever direction the RTD board decides to go in with this candidate, I think it's going to create some really healthy conversation and challenge some ideas and ways of doing business. And so, again, I believe that one of the value added to going through a recruitment process like this, no matter who they end up selecting, is the ability to have those conversations, open dialogues, and to think about new ideas. Sometimes just through interviews, even if you don't end up selecting a candidate, you come up with a new idea, a new way of doing things, or just a new discussion point. I do agree, and I forgot who said it, and I'm sorry that I have it written down, but I think credibility is really important in this. And that's something I've heard from a number of stakeholders, that RTD's brand, reputation, and image is something that is critically important at this period of time. And if whoever is hired does not come in with an impeccable credibility and experience and background, or has some sort of something, I think that's going to get honed in and focused on it, and will be criticized versus the actual recruitment and the selection and that part being celebrated. So I think I'm trying to be incredibly mindful and talking to candidates about that. And we're obviously doing our diligence and background checks and references and all of those things as we go through our process. But I think that really is critically important. And, that's not to say when you get to this level, especially with the public domain as it is today, things come up, right? Decisions get made, you make calculated risks, and they do or don't work out. And so I think we have to look and separate those things out from, does the person have good integrity? Are they ethical? Are they honest? Are they transparent? To me, if you're a good CEO, you take calculated risks, and you hope, and you've done your business and your diligence to make sure that you've got all your pieces in place, that you're mitigating all the risks around it. But sometimes things just don't work out. And so, obviously we don't want someone who has had a career track record of failure after failure, but we want someone who is taking calculated risks and doing the diligence and has justification for why they've made the decisions they've made. Because I think that, as I've heard from you and I've heard from other stakeholders, if we stay the course and we just do the same old thing, we're not going to get anywhere. And so we have to be able to transition. We have to be able to move the ball. We have to be able to take some risk here. We have to be able to measure that risk. And so those are the kind of conversations and the level of diligence I'm having with candidates. And so I hope I like your feedback on that, but that's what I'm looking for. And as I'm going through this process and evaluating candidates.
Greg, can you maybe flip this a little bit? What are you hearing when you were talking to potential candidates, prospects, about the perception of RTD out there?
Yeah. So,
and maybe I'll add on to that. What are the related to that? What are the biggest challenges in getting someone to consider coming to RTD?
Yeah, I think that RTD has an elected board. It's one of the 3 in the country right now that has an elected board. Although there is a transit agency that's talking about moving to an elected board format, so there may be 4 in the near future. And so I think RTD has a perception of being a political body because of that. You know, I've worked with the political boards, elected boards, and I've worked with boards where board members are appointed, whether they're appointed by a governor, they're appointed by a mayor, city council. They sit on the board because they hold an elected position in their community. And, you know, all boards are political. They all have different agendas and different needs. I think that RTD's funding is something that is certainly concerning to individuals. Although I will say the right candidates look at that as an opportunity, right? I think COVID is a concern for people that, you know, ridership is going to be down. How do we manage ridership and safely move people with something like, whether it's COVID or it's the next issue that comes up, because there will be something else in the future. I think that the scrutiny from the state level that you raised is something maybe of a concern. I think that you touched on the size of the RTD service territory, that it's so large and that, you know, it's not a one size fits all. You've got different socioeconomics, you've got different communities, whether it's racial disparities or economic disparities, you've got different population densities, first mile, last mile challenges. Those are all the sorts of things. But I think that the people that I've talked to that seem exciting to me as candidates are the ones that see those as real opportunities, right? And I think that are seizing on the moment of COVID or all of the issues you're facing, whether it's the housing crisis or it's the more recent unemployment, or for that matter, hiring drivers, finding good operators and things like that. Look at that as a real challenge to sit down and, you know, have this honest conversation and really sort of be part of the reimagined RTD process. What is RTD? And I think that, Matt, I think you touched on this, which is, you know, transit has evolved tremendously over 20 years. It's evolved tremendously over the last 3 or 4 years with the autonomous vehicles and the electric technologies, and it's going to continue to evolve at a very rapid pace, you know, and we don't know what's going to be the most successful, whether Hyperloop is the next, you know, new thing or whatnot, and who knows. But I think that the people I'm talking to are those that want to challenge and take a real strong leadership and really want to engage the community, that are not afraid to engage the community, engage your stakeholders, have those conversations, push back and challenge, and not just accept that, you know, what one group wants is the way to go. And I think that that's a real challenge for RTD because you know, you've got 20 something different communities and 15 different boards that represent different groups. And so, you know, what one community might need and a decisions that may be made may appear as though it's leaving another community behind. And I don't think anybody wants that sort of thing. And I think that somebody who can come and have those kinds of conversations and sit down and listen, obtain buy-in and help explain and create a good understanding is the type of leader that I've been looking for. And those are some of the feedback and comments I've heard from some of your peers and your colleagues in the community as well.
Great. All right, we got a couple minutes left with Greg. Anyone else have any final thoughts, comments?
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Greg, could you go over the timeline again, just as you're finishing?
Yeah, so as of right now, and we are going to be reviewing resumes next week and making a selection of which candidates move forward for interviews. I believe we've set aside time for these interviews to take place the first week of August. I want to say August 5th and 6th. And I believe shortly after the 6th, within a matter of a day or so, a selection will be made as to what the finalist candidates, who the finalist candidates are. I think we're on track for that part of the process to take shape and take form. I think that, as I mentioned, we're trying to figure out the stakeholder engagement piece of that, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some more updates on that within the next week. And part of the reason we don't have all of that information right now is simply because, you know, when the governor about a month ago extended the emergency orders, we wanted to wait and see what was going to happen with COVID and what was going to happen from a public health standpoint. And obviously, in a perfect world, we really want everybody to be engaged. And so, you know, unfortunately, we're seeing numbers increase, and it's not just what's happening in the state of Colorado, right? Because we're going to have candidates be coming from other parts of the country, most likely. And so, you know, if I'm making this up, but if someone's coming from LA or New York or Florida or wherever they're coming from, we have to be mindful that we're bringing exposure to your community and to you as stakeholders. And so we want to have a transparent process. We want to have a process where there's buy-in, but we also want to have a safe process for everyone. So a lot of this is very dependent and is moving it's changing on a daily basis as we look and we see what our public health experts are advising us of. So like I said, we're trying to come up with some different avenues and mechanisms that will allow for that public engagement and that transparency and for that input so the board can really take that to heart when they're making their selection. So I would hope that we can have that public input start as quickly as right after those finalists are named. There's probably some things we need to do on our end. Again, whether we have a Zoom call or a Facebook Live or or we do video recordings of candidates, or the candidates do a presentation that we record on there's a lot of different things we're talking about, and everyone has its advantage and everyone has its disadvantage. And so we're discussing that to weigh the advantages and disadvantages and what we really believe is going to be the most, to be able to capture the most input that we possibly can. But I'm hopeful that will take place. It will take place sometime after the 6th, and I'm hopeful it'll be sooner than later. The board has time set aside, and again, this is obviously COVID dependent and availability, but we've locked time aside for a final round of interviews for the board. I want to say it's the 3rd week of August, around the 19th or 20th. When the board will take action to name who the next general manager and CEO is a little bit to be determined. And again, we're talking about these things on our updates and our scheduled meetings. I've had conversation and I feel very comfortable saying that, we want to treat everybody fairly in this process, the candidates fairly. And as you can imagine, if you're looking at 10 resumes, 15 resumes, 8 resumes, or you're interviewing 6 candidates or 3 candidates, only one person gets this job. And when we go to name finalists, if it's 3, 3 people are going to have their names out there, sitting out there publicly, and 2 of them are not going to get selected for this job. And they have to go back to do whatever they were doing in life before this started. And so we want to do this in an efficient manner. We want to do it in a transparent manner. We want to do it in a manner that gets buy-in, but we also want to do it in a way that treats these candidates fairly and doesn't get them strung out there for too long. And so that's why we're trying to do all of our diligence right now up front to try to figure out a way that accomplishes all that, to get that buy-in, to get that input, to be able to receive that input and look at it and consider it and take that in consideration, but also do our diligence as part of this process and make this selection. So if all goes as scheduled and everything works out perfectly, I would be hopeful that by the end of August or shortly after Labor Day, we make a decision. And again, I think that, that would be a nice process because it doesn't keep those candidates sitting out there too long.
Well, thank you so much for making your presentation today and listening to us. We really appreciate it. And we actually would also hope that we get a chance to participate further if there is a place where we can express our thoughts or opinions about these final candidates as it moves forward.
Well, thank you. There will be. And I say this to every stakeholder I talk to. My contact information is available to you. I am available to you. So if there's something else that comes up that you think of, you want me to be aware of, please feel free to reach out. My contact information is also on the RTD website and the recruitment page. So you can seek, my email address is there, my contact information, Roger has it, the board has it. So please feel free to reach out if there's something, but I know we are looking forward to your input and participation as we move forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Joanna, you want to continue with the agenda? Joe, I mentioned Joe is not going to be here. All right.
I will do my best. I don't know. Are all these people on the call? Or
We have Angie's just appeared.
okay, good. Oh, there's
We have Angie, we have Bob Grotto, and we have Mike Meter. Maricela is not had a family emergency and is not going to be able to join us.
So although I can do this, you have more data than I do.
Well, let's call them up. The next topic we brought forward, there's been an ad hoc committee that has been working about 6 weeks or so, I think, on reviewing the Code of Conduct. I thought perhaps the chair could give us kind of the background of why there was an ad hoc committee created, and what the issues were. And then we've got Mike and Bob who can kind of talk through the changes that have been recommended to the board and kind of the thinking. And, you know, that I think from me, my perspective, having participated as an observer for all of these meetings, you know, there's on the surface what you read in the Code of Conduct, and we all as individuals react to what we think it means, how we think it may be applied. Then you start to hear from the professionals, from Bob's team and others, about how it really is day in and day out on our system. And I think the other committee members also, you know, it was a true collaborative effort where people listen to one another. And so I won't take too much of the chair's thunder, but Angie, go ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Listen, thank you. It's always a pleasure to come to the CAC because, you know, that's where I actually started my RTD career, was being on the first CAC. And so it's very, very dear to my heart. I was also listening in to your conversation with Greg Mosier, and I have to tell you, you have your finger on the pulse of exactly where I'm coming from with all of this. You know, I became chair on January 7th, and then the world came to a screeching halt, and everything that could happen has happened. And so I was telling someone, it kind of feels like being on a surfboard in a tsunami right now, just because it's so intense, all of the issues, and you can't make this stuff up, right? But I was looking at something that says great brilliance begins with chaos. And I'm kind of sticking to that. So in terms of why an ad hoc committee is that one of the things that we've been working on very diligently is to open the doors of RTD, to make sure that people understand who we are, what we do, why we do it, and to give us insight, input, and really true collaboration into how we need to move forward as a community. Matt, I absolutely agree with you. You know, transit has changed. 20 years ago was 20 years ago. The way that we communicate in the 1990s, I find really frustrating as well. And one of the things that I've done is I've been talking to key leaders, and I've been asking them one question, and it is, what is it specifically about RTD that concerns you? And what I'm really hearing is communication. We say no all the time. We don't involve people, those kinds of things. And so in 2016, RTD developed a code of conduct, just like 95% of the transit agencies across the country. And in April, Chief Grotto and Mike Meter, who I'm going to introduce you to, brought it forward to the board because they wanted to tweak it. And it garnered a lot of conversation. Now, keep in mind, in April was before the, you know, all the awful stuff that happened. And it became very clear to me that we really needed to do something different. And so I developed an ad hoc committee, but I wanted to bring in experts from our community who had their finger on the pulse of our communities that are very diverse to look at it with us and do a deep dive, and then we would bring it back to the board. So let me just tell you who was on this committee. There were 20 members. I had 5 board members, myself, Director Chantel Lewis, who chairs Civil Rights, Director Ken Mahalik, who lives in Southeast Denver, who's Vice Chair of Civil Rights, Director Kate Williams, who has part of Denver Union Station, myself, and then Director Troy Whitmore from the North. I really wanted diversity on the 5 board of directors who were going to be sitting on this committee. Additionally, we invited and had Evan Dreyer, who was the deputy director for the mayor of Mayor Hancock for the city and county of Denver, Chief Paul Payson from the Denver Police Department, and then I'm going to go through this whole list with you. Britta Fisher, the executive director of the Department of Housing Stability and chief housing officer for the city and county of Denver. Gary Breskins, I can never say his name. He's the chief paramedic from Denver Health. Aubrey Oswald, the advocacy program director for the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. Denise Maez, Public Policy Director for the ACLU of Colorado. Carly Silon, Program Manager for Crisis Intervention Response Unit for the Mental Health Center of Denver. Bob Dorschmer, the Chief Executive Officer of Mile High Behavioral Health Care, and Kate Barton, Senior Vice President and Executive Office Special Projects, Downtown Denver Partnership. We started meeting on May 6th and we concluded on Wednesday of this week, last week, I guess it was last week. And our job was to take a deep look at the Code of Conduct with our staff, including Chief Bob Grotto, who's on the call, and our Assistant General Manager, Mike Meter, as well as Interim General Manager, Paul Ballard, Maricela Sandoval, who is our General Counsel, one of our Assistant General Counsel folks, and Michael Ford, who's our COO. We really wanted to have a comprehensive, deep dive, anything goes in terms of taking this apart and looking at it and looking at the words, looking at the meanings, just the feel of the whole thing. It was an extraordinary experience. I think it was a very, very positive, and I think that it really set the precedence that this is a new RTD. We're going to have open communication, true collaboration, clear transparency, and the ability to listen to what people are saying to us. So what I'd like to do at this point is turn it over to Mr. Meter and the Chief to just talk to you about the Code of Conduct and how it works. Mr. Meter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this, and thanks for having me here with you. I try to join these meetings as often as I possibly can because I always learn something from the perspective of all of you folks that are on this committee, so thank you for that. I won't reiterate too much of what the chair said, or hopefully none of what the chair said, but we really did want to take a really thorough look at this to really make sure that, you know, on the one hand, we're making sure we're doing all the things to provide a safe, clean, and accessible system for everyone. Safety is at the forefront of everything that we do, so that's really, really critically important. And then just make sure that it was being applied fairly and equitably across the board for all of the people that utilize our system. We wanted to also stress the education component of this, right? This is it's a long list of things. Obviously, it's what, you know, the expectation would be. I like to say these are the kinds of things your grandmother would want you to be, right? You know, not putting your feet on furniture and those kinds of things. So it's some basic things. But we wanted to really stress the education. And so we made it very clear that first and foremost, we're going to stress educating people. We're just not going to walk up to people and write them a ticket or anything like that. Hey, here's what the code says. This is the reason we do this. And we'd appreciate that if you would do that. So I think we made it very clear with some changes we made to the language there. I also believe we wanted to take a more people-centric approach to it. So, you know, here's the things that really make the system better. And if we all do these things, then it's going to be a pleasant experience. And I think we accomplished that as well in some of the language changes that we made. But really, the changes that were made, and there were about 20 plus changes that were made, consisted of a couple of things. One, we updated the code to include, you know, things like we have different fare media than we did 5 years ago or 4 years ago. We do things a little bit different from a process standpoint, and we have a slightly different system, more than a slightly different system from 4 years ago when we put this code in place. So we updated it. We also put some clarifying statements in here as well in some of the statements, just so people could clearly understand around things like drinking when we meant alcoholic drinks and those kinds of things. So really just to try to add some clarity to it. And then we combined some things too. There were some things that we felt were redundant per se. We could put those things together and make sure again that, you know, we weren't in any way, shape, or form creating a perception that we could be unfair to any of the different populations that utilize our service as well. So I think all in all, it was a great job put together by the committee. We did have some very, very meaningful discussion, that's for sure. We didn't always agree, but we came to an agreement in the end. So it was done very well. And really, I'm going to turn it over to the chief here. Chief and his staff are responsible for really spearheading the creation of this code of conduct from the very beginning. And obviously him and his staff, the input was invaluable. So I'll turn it over to him to chat a little bit about what maybe his experience was and where he thinks things stand now. Chief?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks you guys for having me here today. This is great. And before I start, I have to say, I was taking notes when you guys were talking about things for our new CEO. There's the truth speaker, straight talker, things like that. I mean, yes, it's what we need, strong leadership, yet someone who can partner with the community. So I know we're going to find a great CEO. So yeah, it was a really cool experience for me. And it was, I really appreciated the chair inviting me as a representative of the RTD security side of the house onto this committee, because it was amazing talking through all these things. First of all, there was like a perception that this was a law, and you know, these are rules. So we're not arresting people based on the code of conduct. But as Mike said, you know, if your grandmother wouldn't like it, then we probably wouldn't either. And the whole idea behind the code of conduct is to provide, you know, a good environment for all of our ridership, make it an enjoyable experience, and give us a tool to where, if, you know, after education and after trying to work with these people, that they're just not going to comply, we have an option, you know. And the only part, you know, the only time this would become criminal would be as if somebody completely refused to comply, and then they would be trespassed off our system, just again to help our riders. It's all based on complaints that we get from our passengers. So the cool thing was, for me, I got to share some of our pain and frustration, and working with some of the more challenged individuals out there that don't want to participate. And it was great to have members from, you know, the Colorado Coalition of the Homeless and ACLU and all these people giving feedback. And at the end of the day, we all agreed. It was amazing. Like the chair said, there was a little back and forth on some things, but you know, everybody is reasonable when they kind of see the big picture of it all. I see where they're coming from and things I hadn't thought of before, and you know what their perception is, and they got to see what ours was. So it was just a great experience, and I feel like we've got an outstanding code of conduct at this point. Honestly, at first I was like, oh, what are we doing? You know, that was a big group of people. And sometimes when you get that large of an audience, it's hard to get anything done, but it was very organized and methodical, and man, we did it. And the other part I really like about this is there's if you will, a white paper that has been created or being created that is going to be part of this document. So in the future, you know, 4 or 5 years from now, as again, we evolve in transit technology and innovation, things change, the code is probably gonna have to be looked at again. It's a living document. But we're gonna have this white paper so people can refer back to it and go, who came up with this, you know, this harebrained idea for a blah, blah, blah. Well, we can see everybody that was on the committee, and it was a very thoughtful process. And it describes how we came to the conclusions we did. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. I was very proud to be on this committee, and I feel like we nailed it. We hit a home run, and everybody at the end of the day walked away feeling good about it. And so, and for us, as a police officer and someone with this huge responsibility for this ginormous system RTD encompasses, at the end of the day, I loved having the support of everybody. So when things, you know, things aren't always perfect, if we can be honest about it and say, hey, we have the backing of these organizations, including, you know, our board members and people like you, it just helps us because, you know, we work for the public, and I think if everybody has a good input, we're good. People will support us, you know, if we're doing the right thing. So that's all I have. I would just open it up if anyone has any questions for myself. I'm here to answer questions.
Well, Chief, what about use of force by the security folks? Was that discussed, and what's sort of your general use of force rules and all? And did you guys discuss whether you really need to be carrying firearms or not?
That wasn't part of this. Again, the Code of Conduct is just a rules-based thing. We have another committee. It's a homeless task force committee, and a lot of these same members are on that task force with us. So part of that program, we are going to look at our use of force policy, how it works, because we contract our security. Security officers by statute in Colorado, they're citizens. So when it comes to use of force, we want them to be either protecting themselves against an attack, or if we have a passenger out there that needs to be defended, that's what they're there for. As far as being armed, that program has been in place for years. I've been the chief here for 3 years. Quite honestly, we're taking a look at everything right now. The entire security model. I'm not 100% convinced we're doing it the right way. I think it was great when we were that big, but now we've there's over 600 people that work in my division here. 300 plus full-time security officers, about 300 secondary employment police officers from Denver, Lakewood, Aurora, and Arvada, and then our very small police force internally. Right now, we're going towards more of an internal expansion of our law enforcement program. And once we get to a certain point to where I feel comfortable and as our board and folks feel comfortable, I think we can scale that back. There is a lot of training that goes involved to having armed officers there. Many people support it, and there's some that don't like it. Again, I'm not 100% convinced either way. So we're gonna have a lot of thoughtful a look at that entire program. So I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on them being armed. I'd love to hear that feedback.
Well, just from my perspective, I think, I'd love to see a lot of data around how often somebody pulls a gun versus, actually discharges their firearm. What sorts of what's your training around that and all before I could really have an opinion? Because it doesn't seem like it's a dangerous assignment, but you guys see a lot of stuff that I don't.
Since I've been the chief here, I've been with the agency for 10 years, a little over 10 years. We've had a couple shootings with security officers involved, and both of those were justified. We had one, it's probably 2.5 years ago, where a guy pulled a automatic weapon on a female security officer, and she wound up shooting this man and killing him. But he was shooting at her too. So that was an easy one. So yeah, they do come across people that are armed on our system. And so I understand why it was put in place. This program, I would like to see a little bit, of a change to that. They do receive extensive training, more than some police agencies. They have to do quarterly firearms training, and most agencies are once a year. So it is strict. They are licensed by the city of Denver. They go through FBI background checks every year, which that's pretty intense. And then we have our requirements. We prefer them to, 90% of them have been through a law enforcement academy or have been trained through military or a prison system. They do have prior experience. We don't just take someone off the street and put them out there. And unless, I should say, it's got tougher for us because now we're over 300. It's hard to find people that are qualified at that level. Mm-hmm. So we have made exceptions for people that have other types of training and, 4-year college degree and things like that. So we can good background and some sort of experience to justify it. But in those cases, we review it before we do that. So
Yeah, well, I just would only say I think it's an appropriate time, obviously, to be looking at those kinds of issues, and they're very complicated, and
It is
you
very,
know, and
and
I
the world, as someone
appreciate
said
what you're
earlier,
doing.
the world's changing. So
Right.
it's,
Right.
Chief,
so yeah,
while we jump in here on that, sounds like might you be willing to have, if we put this specific topic on a future agenda, would you be willing to come back and have a fuller discussion around that? Because I think as Ben mentioned, it'd be nice, it'd be helpful to understand the some of the statistics. And I think the committee has had in years past, I don't remember when it was, kind of an overview of how our security works, but I think it is complicated because we're multi-jurisdictional.
yeah,
And we don't have a full police force ourselves that cover the entire district. So lots of agreements with other jurisdictions and other departments, not a perfect system necessarily. So
yeah, and it's,
if you'd be willing, I'd like to schedule that in the future.
I am willing. I love that idea. Internally, it's interesting. Our transit police, we're authorized right now to 13 sworn police officers, which, considering we're 2,400 square miles, that's not enough, obviously. So most of our police officers, they act more in a management capacity and oversight to assist security officers and then our contracted police officers. But the legislators did give us, they updated the authority, I think 4 years ago. I'm sure you could probably speak to that. But the authority, the jurisdiction now is all 8 counties. Where before it was really specific, you had to be on RTD property. So you'd have a police officer that was a police officer when he's standing on a platform, and he'd drive off the lot, and now he's no longer a police officer. It was just insane and made it impossible for the operation, but the legislators fixed that. So we actually have a really good transit policing authority over all 8 counties. It's kind of like having 8 sheriff commissions. So it works very well, but I think we've reached a point now and a level, we're doing over 55,000 calls for service now annually. Wow. So that's a lot to manage with 13 people. We're very overwhelmed. So, but I think to your point, Ben, I think there is a way to scale back on some of this security and maybe go to a different model to where we still have RTD staff that's out there, not necessarily security or armed, but eyes and ears and people that can help us manage things, and that strategically put some police officers around for rapid response and emergency. So I think our liability for the agency, and which is really the taxpayer, because we're owned by the taxpayer, I think it's going to help us in the long run. So we are taking a very hard look at that. And yeah, if you guys don't mind, I could burn up a couple hours with you easy. So.
Great.
I think we'd love to have you come back, and also when you get to come back, it would be interesting to know more about any kind of training that the security folks have, especially regarding all people's mental health and the issues we have with so many folks that are on drugs these days and
yeah,
become really a little crazy on the train or the bus.
Yeah, and it's they do receive mental health first aid training, and I'm looking at a letter here while I was waiting to come on with you guys. Before we even get them, they have over 100 hours of training in diversity training and customer service, intervention, best practice. So they do come to us highly trained, and then once they're here, they go through a 2-week academy, and then they have field training with another person out in the field for 2 weeks. And really and truly, we do provide ongoing training and offer a lot for them, but it could be better. It could be better. There's always room for improvement.
Well, thank you for sharing with us.
Any questions, other questions on this topic, or while we have the team here?
Oh yeah, I've got a question, kind of back up to the Code of Conduct. So in terms of changes made or proposed to the Code of Conduct, could you just give me a little insight into what the practical implications of that might be? I mean, how might, in a real life situation, how might your security team handle something differently than they may be used to because of these changes to the code of conduct?
Well, there was a couple things that were problematic in the old code. One was there was a part in there we actually eliminated a few things because what we tried to do this time was take away discretion to make it more simple. We shortened a lot of it. There was one part in there that allowed someone to loiter for 2 hours before we made contact, and it was impossible. Our folks are saying, Chief, what are we supposed to do? Put a wristband on them when they walk in, and it changes colors after 2 hours, and then someone would walk away and then come back. And the whole idea was, we want to keep things moving on the system, and not be a place for people just to hang out. That's the issue is, especially down at Union Station in the bus concourse, it's so narrow. And if you get 100 folks down there that aren't using the system, it creates a problem. So the 2 hour part was problematic. So that's one thing we took out. Excuse me, I'm choking up here. So it was just really things like that. It just needed to be cleaned up. There was one part we got stuck on was lying down. My argument was, I can't think of any transit reason to lie down. If you're lying on the floor, we're probably going to call 911 or, see if you need medical assistance. You can't go to a city administration building and lie down and things like that. But so we came to, again, an agreement that if you're impeding the flow of our operation, if you're causing a safety hazard for someone who's visually impaired, things like that. There's just details we worked out. So we kept the meat in there and just got rid of, some of the things that didn't belong. It just cluttered it up, if you will. Did I answer your question, Matt?
Well, I think so. I imagine I could guess what much of the conversation was about, and it's a tough problem.
Yeah.
RTD is just like libraries, frankly, is not meant to be a place for people to be when they don't have any other safe place to be. And they weren't created for that purpose. On the other hand, in the real world, that's what happens. And somehow you have to balance all of that, which is really, really difficult.
It's very difficult. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, that was the issue, was the people that are homeless or experiencing that for whatever reason. So this other group that I'm talking about, we are working as a committee to have good solutions for these people, rather than just, because, we're all human beings too. I don't want to send somebody out into the night, when it's 20 degrees outside. But we would like to have an option to say, come over here, we're going to get you a ride to, point A to point B. We're going to work through some of that. And then we're also partnering with, the rescue mission, the harm reduction team, which is a group that helps people that are drug users and things, just to get them into safe places. So, if we can get all these partnerships put together, we'll have a solution. Because again, we can't enforce our way through this. We can't just keep arresting people, because what does that do? They go through the jail, they come out, and now they have a warrant or they have a fine that they can't afford to pay. So someone said earlier, thinking outside the box. We're outside the box, 100% outside the box. So, and we're not mental health folks. So we just brought on last year a mental health clinician. We're working on a grant right now. We think, like 90% sure, we're going to get 3 more. So we're going to have 4 mental health clinicians that will give us great coverage. I mean, the entire city of Denver only has 6. So RTD is going to have 4, which is that's great. And then these clinicians.
I'm sorry, don't you have a homeless outreach coordinator now as well?
Well, there's another grant, the Hope Grant, and that's going to fund an outreach coordinator. Interestingly, we're interviewing for a couple police officer positions right now, and two of our candidates have degrees in social work and have a lot of experience with this. So that might be a way to pay for a police officer / homeless outreach coordinator to work with all these agencies, because it's a full-time job. As
It
big
is
as we are,
interesting
it's a
how
full-time job.
that has become a bigger part of what, as Matt was saying, I mean, libraries, I know the Denver Public Library, and I assume libraries in other cities are doing the same thing, now have clinicians in their libraries.
They do.
And I think it's wonderful to see RTD heading that way and adding more, because, we are all part of the grand problem, and we've got to all work together to figure out how to deal with this. But I imagine 10 years ago or whenever, that would not have been something RTD would have on its payroll.
Yeah, I've been in law enforcement for 34, I'm going on 35 years now. Michael Washington, I don't know if you guys know him, but I'm sad to say he's no longer with us, but he's a great guy. He came to me and said, he says, I want to help you with this. And so we started some conversations, and then he put together this whole group, including the Denver Library. I had no idea. I'm like, why? Wait, you're telling me the library has clinicians? They have this fantastic program. So they're actually on our committee. They're helping us too. So I think we're going to, copy some of the things they're doing. And they have a great system, because if they have their code of conduct, and, the same with us, if you're not following their rules, they will actually have a clinician or a social worker meet with you, get an understanding of what the issue is. And while you're suspended, they give you some, they check a few boxes. You do this, you do this, you do this, and you'll be welcome back into our library. So the people actually have to earn their way back in. So, but they have the staff to do that. And I was so shocked to hear that the library would go to that extreme. But, their philosophy is, this is life as we know it now, and we can't just lock the door. These everybody's part of our society, and so we're taking on the same thought process.
So just out of curiosity, most of the issues you face, the code of conduct issues, the behavioral issues, whatever you want to call them, are they really centered in and around downtown Denver, or are they more spread out in our, as we several of us have mentioned, our really huge area RTD serves?
I would say Union Station, Civic Center are the two pain points, but it's spread out. It's throughout the system. Boulder has a lot of issues there. And then we have issues on our trains at the end of line, where people don't want to get off the train. And so we have to have security at the end of line now for all of those points, and then the cities, Lone Tree for one, they're like, hey, you're having these people get off the train, and now they're in our city, and now we're stuck with them. And so they're having to deal with issues. So it's very challenging. We have to constantly visit with people and come up with solutions all over the place, because 44 cities, I think we go through. So it's very challenging. It really is. And I think, again, this is where having more internal police officers to deal with that sort of thing. My goal is to have a group. I always tell our officers, when you're with somebody, solve their problem. Don't just, put a Band-Aid on it and walk away. Solve the problem. We have that luxury in transit. It's not like a sheriff's office or a city police department where you have to constantly be moving. Take the time and solve their problem, and, try and resolve it so it doesn't recreate itself, an hour later. So.
I would just echo what Roger said, and I really appreciate your passion for doing things differently and truly trying to figure out ways to serve our community. Thank you.
I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, you know, there's another chief that's kind of a mentor to me. And he has a great, you know, what they do at this agency. My son actually works for this agency. During their briefings and meetings, they're constantly reminded, you know, I call it one-on-one policing. Their chief says, go into everything as with a mentality that this is your family member. Maybe it's your crazy uncle or your cousin that, you know, has an issue, but it's a family member. Solve the problem. So, and that, I just like that. We have a great opportunity here to do things differently.
Wonderful.
All right, any other questions for the chief or Chair Malpiedi?
I would just like to say that the RTD Board of Directors last night did pass this to move forward to the actual board meeting for a final vote of 14-1. So they were pleased with the work and the changes within the Code of Conduct. So we're very happy about that. And literally, we have an amazing staff that works in this area. And I think we all learned a lot. But I think the biggest thing is the difference between really what people perceive and what is really happening. And I think that we got a really good balance in this document on that. So we'll make sure that you guys have copies of this, including the white paper, for your reading pleasure, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had just a couple other updates on the agenda. One is
guys, I'm just going to say goodbye and let you do your thing here.
Thank you very much.
Bye, you guys. Thanks.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
The Ad Hoc Committee, or not the Ad Hoc Committee, the Oversight Committee that is being put together by the governor and the legislature. Today was the day that was set for them to announce appointments to that body. We have not heard any names, so I don't know if they're on schedule or not. But as soon as we hear any names, I will forward it to you. We're kind of all sitting and waiting. I imagine Angie, if she was on, I don't know that she could tell us. I imagine that she has had some conversations. At least I hope she's had some conversations about possible names. But they've been pretty tight-lipped since it's being managed by the governor's office. The other thing is we are continuing to work on some sort of virtual candidate forum by district. The CAC would be one of the presenters. We have, I think I mentioned, I mean, I've talked to the mayors and we've got chambers, some transit groups interested in participating. It's a little herding cats because we'll be hosting so many individual ones. We had, the last I looked, we had, there were still 19 candidates that had their petition formats approved by the Secretary of State. So they theoretically are the ones that are out there collecting signatures either by email or mail or signature, you know, the traditional way. We did have at one point 30 candidates who had filled out a candidate affidavit and indicated they were running, but I do think the challenge of getting enough signatures in the world of COVID explains a lot of that drop off from the initial interest to what we're seeing today, likely being circulated. Those are due July 27th, so less than 2 weeks, and then we'll once the Secretary of State reviews those, we'll know what our pool of candidates looks like. And then finally, I wanted to mention that we have the nominating committee for the CAC vacancies will be meeting next week to shortlist and probably make some decisions. Those appointments go to the board and in August, and those folks will join us on our August meeting. and we had 32 applications. We now have 5 spots to fill. Heather Cronenberg has recently stepped down. She had a job conflict that was, she has not, if you all know, she had been a very steady attender and participant until about 3 months ago, and then has not been able to participate, and that is the reason. And she reached out and thought that it made sense to resign, asked if it made sense to resign now so that we could fold that opening into our current process rather than having it sit out there later. And I was happy and appreciative of her doing that. So we'll have 5 new folks. Any questions or thoughts or any information, sharing of information for the good of the order?
Hey, Roger. Hey, Roger, it's Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Would you guys like an update at all about what's going on as far as Ridgegate goes and Lone Tree and the end of line station? Just as, you know, I know that it's, well, nothing's going on down there, but, you know, we do have several projects that are in process and that will be adding, you know, potentially several hundred units of housing and people at the end of line station. So I just don't know if it's appropriate or if anybody would be interested in that.
I would be.
I think it makes sense. Let's put that on the next agenda.
Okay.
We also, I was hoping to have, I haven't got confirmation, but on the radar is an update on the 16th Street Mall project that it is continuing to slowly progress. Denver City Council voted Monday to continue moving forward. So there was an attempt by one council member to divert funds away from that project, but it was not successful. So I think that could be another one that, you know, it is in Denver, but you know, everyone, riders from all districts end up using the 16th Street Mall. So I think there is, you know, certainly some interest in that. So thank you, Elizabeth. I'll get that down.
Of course, thank you.
What others? Anyone else have anything they'd like to throw out as a future agenda item while we're talking about that? Okay. Well, we're all.
Hey, Roger.
Yes, sir.
I'm always interested in the Colfax, you know, like BRT and kind of what's going on with that with the city of Denver. So if we're going to talk about the 16th Street Mall, and maybe we could fold that in too and see what Denver's up to there.
Okay. Maybe we craft a agenda, the whole meeting around kind of updates on some of these major projects and occurrences. We'll also have the inline is getting closer to the closer to opening date. So I'll see if we can't package that all so that it all kind of makes sense.
A good idea.
That's an excellent idea.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Stay healthy. Wear your masks, all that. Wash your hands. And thank you for joining the meeting today. We'll see each other virtually next month.
Sounds good.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.